we're all resonating with just the beauty of that sound that was filling the room. What I want to share today is based on something that happened about a year ago. I woke up in the morning. Now, in the age I am now, I'm in what we think of as the final part of the journey. And I woke up one morning and I found myself thinking, wow, when I take my last breath, what I do not want to have to say to life is, I'm sorry I was too afraid. And I say that for a number of reasons that I know about myself and also for most of us. The question is, are we allowing ourselves to be lived without reservation, without hesitation, and without exception? If we think of ourselves as what spirit can fill itself up with and then come into the world to express, are we offering our whole self? And about 40 years ago, I was meditating in a pine woods behind the house I lived in at that time in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And because of my therapy in LA before I got east, my therapist used a lot of hypnosis and visualization. So as I was meditating, this image of me dropped down in front of me, wearing a blue business suit. Now, mind you, at this moment, I was on the ground in the Berkshires out in the country in my little sweats sitting on the floor. And so this image dropped in of me in a blue business suit. Of course, in those days, it was a skirt and jacket. And I knew from my early experience, blend with this image and find out what it's bringing. So one of the great gifts this man gave me was always, when an image drops in, become it. So you feel it from the inside, because you want a body-based experience when you're playing around with images. And this image of me had this core of steadiness that I absolutely promise was not my core at that time. And I took it in and I felt it and I thought, wow, this is like a level of steadiness and strength that I didn't even know existed. But I realized 2 years later, as I was in front of a group of managers processing a management simulation project, that I was inhabiting at least the beginnings of that quality. Now, the weird part about this is, and this is where I want to underscore, saying yes is very important. And if there are any places where yes bumps into fears or issues you have, you're going to be banging up against them. And in those days, I had the most crippling, I've probably talked about this before, speaking phobia. It was like, just let me die overnight and it'll be better than my having to go talk in front of people the next day. Well, I have to say, by saying yes constantly now, I've had an entire career of teaching and talking to people. It's like the most ridiculous thing, given who I was psychologically back when all this really got ramped up and started. So I've had a lot of experience in terms of saying yes to something terrifying and figuring out to have a way through it, always in my mind, so that spirit was having as much of me as it could have to live in the world. So that's been my underlying intention, is let me be lived as fully as possible. So I have all my little notes here about what I want to share today about a way of being that has changed my life entirely and has been wonderful. I do want to say one thing. I'm going to be talking about intention and saying yes and blah, blah, blah. One thing that I want to underscore, and this may be my own weirdness, but because quantum thinking now tells us we live in a world of infinite possibility. Anything that ever could be, can be, in the realm of potentiality. So when I create intentions, or when I have anything I'm saying yes to, I am just adding the sense that I am connecting with the optimal expression of whatever that is. I don't know what that is, and I always assume that part of optimal is it's serving the greater good for the greater number in some way that I'm not going to know about. So as I talk about this, I just want to underscore around intentions and saying, yes, I have in my mind that I'm connecting with what's optimal, even though I have not the remotest clue what that is. And I do think, I have to say, if I had known what that future self was leading me toward, I'm sure I would have dug in my heels and found a way to say no to that journey. So the not knowing actually is a big piece of what I want to say. And this is so different from what some people have to say about manifesting. I have a kind of a different take on it from my experience. So I just want to underscore, I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. It's just probably going to be a little different from what you might have heard from other people who are talking about intention and creating things. So intention is the first piece. What are you, like my intention that morning when I woke up saying I don't want to have to say I was too afraid. The intention became a commitment to stop holding back. And in fact, these videos on multidimensional living that I now have on my website, I have said no to that probably for 50 years. No, I'm not going to share that. No, I'm not going to put that. Well, we didn't have the internet back then, but I wasn't going to share that part of my life until I took, and I'm not going to talk about this today. I just want to float it out there. I took an alternate self journey. I took a journey to the alternate reality where a version of me lives without having had the fear I had. And I blended with her, and that was all very interesting, except I noticed that I woke up the morning after that little adventure saying, no, I'm not going to do that, no. And the whole time I'm saying no, that whole week, I do therapy sessions on Zoom. That entire week, every time I had a break, I noticed I was making videos. And I thought, well, this is like really kind of odd. I'm yelling no and I'm making videos. Okay, but you can't make me post them. So what am I doing? First thing Saturday morning, up goes the first one. And I went, oh, I guess I'm posting these. It's something changed. And here's what I think happens. Now, this has no research behind it, but it's what my experience is. When we blend with images, or we take journeys to, let's say, a future self or an alternate self, I actually think that there is an information transfer. That when our body-mind experiences another experience, we're coming back with more information than we had when we started. And I have a suspicion that the new information generates a new template, and the body-mind begins to organize itself differently. Because I have a good friend of mine who's a colleague, and I said to her, I've been changing since that journey. And she said, yeah, you have. I don't know how. I can't tell you how other than posting these videos. But I feel the shifts. And again, because I'm always orienting to optimal possibilities, I don't worry about not knowing. I just want to be open and receive. So these experiences are what are behind what I want to share today. Because my life, I guarantee you, had I not been doing the future self work over these 40 years, I would not be me here now. I just wouldn't have. My fears would have won, and I would have been doing something, but it wouldn't have been this kind of something. And the other thing I found, by the way, in calling on my optimal life over all these years, I'm living a life nobody else would probably want to, but it exactly perfectly fits me. And I have a feeling that if we're constantly calling what's optimal for us, what is what fits exactly the right way is what emerges, even if you have no idea what that's going to be. So always orient to optimal outcomes. Or, as good as optimal outcomes are good, and if I'm doing something around, thinking about healing things that are going on in the culture, and that one I always offer to the greatest good for the greatest number, because I'm assuming I have no idea how the greatest good for the greatest number is actually going to look. So part of this process is being comfortable not knowing. That not knowing is, I think I hear crickets. Is that my phone? I forgot to turn my phone off. If we hear crickets again, I know it's going to be my phone. All right, so anyway, just always orienting to the greatest good for the greatest number, or your greatest good. But here's why I'm such a fiend for not knowing. We're all very conditioned. We have a lot of ideas and conditioning and understandings that may have worked. It might even still work now, but it might not be what is going to support what wants to unfold. So being willing not to know leaves us open for synchronicities that we would never expect. It leaves us open for shifts that we wouldn't even have known how to go and get. But we notice that something's arising that is a little different. We're having a different thought about something or a different response. To just be willing to notice those things, to have those arrive and just say, oh, I have never, I can't tell you how many times I've been walking across a room going, why have I never thought that before? A new thought will drop in that somehow I can now tolerate or receive. But the other piece here is to be willing to do the work you need to do to not resist. Now, as a therapist, I know, I'm used to people coming in, but I do want to say it's worth being open to what you need to work on as you're moving toward allowing in a different way of being. Because there's no way, I don't think there's a way in the world to say yes to change without occasionally having something pop up that's going, eek, or no, or I can't stand it, or go away. I never wanted to do that. So to be open to making room to see how spirit wants to live you in a way you hadn't thought about before or realized. So here's kind of one form to play with manifesting. And as I say, this is not like the usual thing you hear about, where you're making, boards of images and you're thinking about what things will be like. The hardest thing in doing this particular kind of process is getting out of the way. Not letting yourself try to figure out, how's this supposed to be? What do I do next? But really getting out of the way to notice what's arising and arriving. What am I receiving right now? So in this particular form of manifesting, first step is your intention that you create. Make sure when you make an intention, try it on and see if your body mind is resonating with it, if it feels real and not just a string of words, but that it enlivens or touches something that feels real. Then, what you guys already all do, say yes to that intention and notice how your body feels when you say yes. Is that a resonating experience? When I've done future self work with people, a key at the end of those journeys is always, now can you say yes to that experience and all those qualities living into you? It doesn't mean there's instantaneous change, because to me, this is all a very organic process. And just like this morning's going to become this afternoon, in its own way, we become what the new information we've brought in becomes who we are. And it's not a doing process. You're not rehearsing it. You're not repeating it. You're saying yes to it. so that you are an open field through which that new possibility can emerge. Then what you're basically saying yes to is being lived into the manifest expression of what you've touched. As you reach out into this, what Gene Houston calls it the quantum foam, you're reaching out to a probability to pull it into manifest expression. Now, here's something that can sound not so thrilling, but it's really actually quite empowering. You want to be willing to surrender in an active way. This isn't surrender giving up. This is surrender, okay, live me. Go ahead and live me. I think I may have mentioned in another talk that over the years, I have felt like a violin when I get in front of people and I'm talking. And I'm very aware that I'm not the musician, I'm not the composer, and I'm being played as an instrument. Recently, I was graduated to being a viola. I have no idea what that means, but we'll see. I never know these things ahead of time, so I'm curious about what's different for a viola and a violin. It's a little scary, so I don't think about it too much because it means something, the image changed, okay. So you're being willing, you're surrendering in a willingness to be lived and to allow that being lived to move through. This little green thing's coming off. Is this okay?
It's okay.
We'll send you a bill.
Oh, I see. Oh, no. It's very all the way around. It won't fall off. That's what I'm getting. So now, you're surrendering to being lived. You are willing to receive without knowing. So you're open and willing and receiving without figuring it out, without knowing what's next. This is a journey of discovery. Then, and according to a lot of people, this is one of the more important pieces. I've always done it unconsciously, but thinking about it, it's true, is then acting on the changes. What behavior or what action, like for me, getting up complaining and then making the videos. Making the videos was the action, as was posting them. You're just watching. What needs to happen next? You're not figuring it out. You're just being open. What do I feel moved to do? This is a lot about sensing, feeling moved, feeling not moved, receiving. Is that making sense thus far? I can only tell you, and I wish I could describe it better, but having lived this for all these years now, I sometimes I'm sitting in front of my computer before a session and I just wonder, how did that little girl get here? Because doesn't make any sense from where I started to where I am. And that's only been possible because I've been saying yes and getting lived into beyond my imagining. And that was the good thing. It was beyond my imagining, because my imagining was just fainting or dropping dead or doing all kinds of things. Not when I was getting over my speaking phobia, do I have compassion for me back in those days. I would stand in front of an audience, and if you held my hands like this, the water would be dripping all the way down. It was just terrible. And I used to imagine the little girl in me with her arms wrapped around me behind my legs, and I'd be saying to her, I will handle this. You don't have to talk to these people. It was awful. It was just awful. But I kept saying yes. I can't believe I kept saying yes, but I did keep saying yes. And so I know how powerful the yes is, the willingness to receive and then act. It creates things more than we maybe can imagine and maybe have given ourselves permission to have. Those are a couple of things that can hold us back. What will the family say? Or, what will my partner say? Or, oh dear, what are my friends going to think? That all needs to just be put aside and to say, I don't know yet. I'll just have to see what unfolds. So here's a daily practice I would love to offer that I ask everyone I know to do this every day. It's easy. It's a little tiny sentence. And the little tiny sentence says, I am receiving and living into my optimal life. That's it. I am receiving and living into my optimal life. You're not asking yourself to know what that is. You're not asking yourself to figure out how to do that. You're opening to spirit and allowing the fullness of what your journey into your optimal life looks like. So I think I'm about done. I could go way too long on quantum stuff. I just want to say that the findings and the information from quantum physics is really, really exciting. Moving out of a linear perspective where this has to follow that, has to follow that. When we think about the potential that we can bring information from alternate realities or the multiverse or even just healing forces in the subtle realms of our own world, it means the sky's the limit. When I was a little kid, I used to think reality was like finger painting. You could just get your fingers with all different colors and go crazy. It really is probably that creative if we can allow ourselves to have permission to reach into what is this enormous quantum reality, beyond our imagining enormous, and with potentials that are absolutely everywhere. I will tell you one quick story from Jean Houston. I can tell this because she wrote this in a book, in a foreword to a book. She had a colleague who had very serious outcomes from Lyme disease over a long period of time. She was pretty debilitated. Jean took her on a journey to an alternate self who was healthy. I don't know how Jean does it. She doesn't say, but I would have had them blend. But however she did it, the woman came back, and I don't know how long it took, but she is now 90% free of all those symptoms. That, for me, is an information transfer. And I think that's accessible to each and every one of us. And with our world right now, the way it looks, just let yourself play with the idea there is a version of us and our world that is, what, kinder, more aware of oneness. You can choose whatever quality you can imagine. And just imagine how it would be if we could call on some of that information and bring it back for our collective good. And I think that kind of creative process is absolutely possible. And so with that, I will say, wish you well, and remember, every single day I am receiving and living into my optimal life. What could be an alternate life? My optimal life. Take care.